is quite an occasion for both presidents. As we were reflecting, of course, Joe Biden's met Michael D. Higgins before, but not as a president.
Yeah, so this is really quite a significant visit, and I think Joe Biden, this is very much so a official state visit, but it's also a very personal one for him as well. I mean, we're seeing he did take some time yesterday. He went to Belfast, but he was very quick to, hightail it back to Dublin and then into his motorcade to Louth. He went to see Carlingford Castle, which is the last Irish landmark that his great-great-grandfather would have seen before he left for New York. And then he spent that time in Dundalk afterwards meeting people lining the streets keen to meet him. And he keeps bringing up his visits to Ireland when he was a senator.
And it's interesting that visitors book, the ledger inside the residence, quoting an Irish proverb, "Your feet will bring you where your heart is," adding, "It's an honour to return." But again, that word peace being written there, pledging to recommit to peace, equity and dignity. There are still these political messages being delivered.
Yeah, very much so. And right before he boarded the Air Force One on his way to Ireland, he told reporters, I want to keep the peace. I'm going to keep the peace. And that's very much what he has done, I think, so far on this trip. He didn't stay in Belfast very long, and that has been subject to some criticism that, he's here for the Good Friday 25th anniversary, but he spent a couple of hours in Belfast, and for those hours he was asleep. I just want to point to something else. I mean, the visit has been pretty much very positive, but there is a little bit of opposition politically, as there always is going to be to a US president visiting. People Before Profit, which have 5 TDs here in the Irish Parliament, they held a protest yesterday outside of the GPO in Dublin, protesting President Biden's visit. They're boycotting the joint address today. And also, I'm just seeing a pooling copy come in from White House reporters who are very closely following the president. They're saying that as they got near Áras, there was one man holding a piece of paper that said, "Arrest Biden." There is a little bit of opposition to his presence, but it's very little, and he has been overwhelmingly warmly welcomed, I would say.
And what would be the reason for those protests? Because we do expect, of course, again, some indication that the US is prepared to invest literally with dollars in the Republic, as is the case, of course, in Northern Ireland, where he promised perhaps this additional investment if they moved the political process forward.
Yes, so People Before Profit would be a left-wing political grouping here in Ireland. They put out quite a harshly worded statement on Monday. They said, President Biden is a warmonger. They disagree with his actions in Iraq. Of course, President Biden has very much hailed the Good Friday Agreement and said, look, it brought peace to this island, isn't it a great thing? But People Before Profit, who, they're very, very left-wing, they have, very much so, even though America has been against Russia's moves in Ukraine, they're saying, well, what about your actions in other parts of the world?
Yeah.
And they would also be of the opinion that in the bilaterals, that President Michael D. Higgins, for example, who we're seeing now, him and his wife, Sabina Higgins, they've been very prominent anti-war campaigners. They would say in those bilateral meetings, raise all those issues with him. I don't know if that's likely to happen. I mean, this is very much so a positive photo opportunity, very much so for President Biden and his officials and the Irish Taoiseach and delegates. So, look, I don't think we don't know what might be discussed. Perhaps such things will be raised. We've yet to see, I suppose. But I don't think the joint address to the Oireachtas later on this afternoon, it's not going to be, it's going to be very much keeping the peace again. He's going to talk about the strong political ties between the US and Ireland.
Yeah, and have any eyebrows been raised at the fact that we've got Sinn Féin's leader from Stormont, Michelle O'Neill, in the audience for that address, and indeed Sinn Féin's former president, Gerry Adams?
Yeah, that's quite an interesting one. I mean, we are going to see also, as you mentioned, their former Taoiseach, Enda Kenny and Bertie Ahern, they're also
Yeah,
going to
yeah.
return to Leinster House. That is customary that all former Taoiseach are invited to such a monumental joint address. That would happen with most visits. I think it's going to be interesting to see how well Gerry Adams and Michelle O'Neill are received. But look, I think in the spirit of the Good Friday Agreement, there is a recognition there that that agreement was made possible because all parties sat around the table, and perhaps that's a reflection of that also.
Now, of course, we had President Biden joking, I'm not going home, I'm staying here, indicating that the residence was very much like the White House. But he is due to head to west of Ireland tomorrow. And, of course, we reflect he's got a certain Joe Kennedy in his White House party as well. So yet more symbolism to come tomorrow.
Yes, so Joe Kennedy was appointed special envoy, and he's accompanying President Biden on this trip. Again, like President Biden does have a day full of commitments today in Dublin, of very serious. He's meeting the president, he's having a bilateral with the Taoiseach, then he's going to addressing the joint Oireachtas, really quite serious political diary events. But then he's going back to that personal side of the trip, heading off to Mayo. He's going to visit the Knock Shrine, which is it's quite a very much so a religious significance. It's believed that there was an apparition there many years ago by the Virgin Mary and other saints. So he's very much so connecting with his Catholic roots there. But it's also, I think, it's something that an American would do in a visit to Ireland. They would try and visit, for example, the Knock Shrine. That's a very popular tourist hotspot, and he's very much so like a tourist in that sense.
And how is the tourist visit going down with the Irish public? I mean, how is this being played on the news channels and television and so on?
Look, it's dominating Europe coverage, and it's the same for RTE, which is the state broadcaster. It's dominating coverage. Virgin Media, also the other main broadcaster. If you're tuning into the radio, it's all that you can hear. The front pages today are splattered with photographs, with headlines. It is the big political story of the week. Like, there is no doubt about that. And for a US president to come to a country as small as Ireland, 5 million population, and to spend 3 days here visiting really everything and anything that he can, as much as he could squeeze into that short couple of day visit, like, that does not go unnoticed. It is quite significant that even though Ireland is a small country, the role that it has on the global stage, like, it's really not to be underestimated. And that same role, whenever you have St. Patrick's Day, of course, we see the Taoiseach head over to the White House. That's a full day that the Taoiseach spends, with officials.
Yeah.
It really gives a really grand platform for the country on an international stage.
And the sun is shining too, which can't be bad, of course, given all this, the weather we saw yesterday. Gabija, thank you very much indeed for your thoughts. Political reporter there at the Irish Independent.